out here, it's maybe a little bit more scary because there's going to be less interaction. I don't know. On Sunday mornings in youth class, it's interactive. But anyway, I guess he's done. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I've toyed around with, I always like to title a message, right? And it may start with one thing and it may go into something else. So this one is kind of in between, not even going to tell you the story or the title of it because it doesn't matter. But what I want to ask you the question is what is your purpose? Okay? Or another way to put that, what is your calling if you want to look at it that way? All right, so as we talk tonight, I want you to think about that. And don't think about what I call, the politically correct answer. Oh, well, I'm supposed to do this, this, and this. It's like, what has God called you to do? Look at it, get really personal with that, right? What does he call me to do? What has he called you to do? What is your purpose? What's God's plan for you, right? Now, as a church body, we're to glorify God in all that we do, right? I think anything that we do, we should glorify God and have a right relationship with him. We should love him, obey him, love others, serve others, all these things, right? That can be more of like that correct, politically correct answer, if it sounds it. But I want us to go just a little bit, maybe a little bit deeper in that as far as you think about, yourselves, because God's called each of us in a different way for a different purpose. I know and I've said it more than once when I first started coming here and got to begin to know people, it was just like, gosh, there's no way I'm going to be like Dathan, or my goodness, there's no way I'm going to be like Brother Kelly, or there's no way I'm going to pray like Brother Ralph, and begin to try to make myself not like these people, but, what I'm trying to say is what I realize is we're our own people. We're going to teach or preach a certain way. We're going to pray a certain way. And each of us all working together is what gets the message across, because we're all going to bring it in a different way, that I think gets across to people, right? We look at Psalms chapter 71, verse 7 and 8. I like what it says here, and I'm going to try to tie a lot of things back to Scripture as we go along. It says, "My life is an example to many, because you have been my strength and protection. That is why I can never stop praising you. I declare your glory all day long." Right? So our life is going to be an example to people, and that's how we need to live and understand is, we're exemplifying Christ if we call ourselves Christians. And each of us are going to, kind of, I guess, exemplify that in a different way depending on, what our purpose is or what our calling is. Right. So when I think of mine, and I've this actually when Pastor did spring that on me Sunday. He was like, right before he said, "Hey, how about you go up there and just open up and say a word?" And I'm like, 30 seconds. I really like to put thoughts down. I don't just like speaking off the cuff. I'm much more comfortable when I have a moment to do that. And when I come off the stage, I looked at him. I said, "I sure am glad that you had me do this." I was like, because you had already asked me that morning to speak tonight because he wanted to be able to go in the young adults class. And I'm like, I got nothing, and it's Sunday. Now, I like to be way more prepared than that, right? I'm like, I can. So, as I come off from talking or whatever, and I'm thinking, all I could think about is the word smile, right? So, have you ever thought about the power of a smile? So I look at, I can say my purpose here is teaching young people and doing that. But if I really get down to it, God uses me to get smiles out of people. Now, I don't try to be funny always, right? I want to be serious. But too many people walk around with, what's the correct word I can say? A sad face, or I'm going to say a poo face. A what? Yes, the mully grubs, all these different things, right? And I like to see people smile because smiling can be healthy, right? It can do a lot for us, right? I did a little bit of research. Google's my friend when I go to looking up stuff, right? And it says that a simple smile uses 10 to 12 muscles, little grin. But if you really give that a great big old smile, studies have shown it uses upwards to 40 or more muscles, right, in your face and so forth. Now, a frown does the same thing. You know, it can use about the same amount of muscles, right? So we're still getting a little exercise out of our face, but smiling, you know, can relax you, right? And relaxing you can help you increase your immune system, and it can increase white blood cells. So, I mean, smiling's got some healthy things. Now, this is what, I don't know if it was the Mayo Clinic or whatever I was reading, you know, and if it was in Google, it should have been true, right? Isn't that how the old saying is, right? All right, smiling can be contagious. I feel like if we smile, then chances are, you know, or somebody's going to smile back, right? Just like if you yawn. Yawning is contagious, right? If somebody yawns, if they were to do it right near, I'd probably, great big old yawn, right? You're all going to yawn, yeah, exactly. I think I almost did, all right? You know, so, but if you smile near somebody, chances are somebody's going to smile back, right? Smiling can reduce stress. So we've had this health fair for the past 2 days at work, and I was sick at the end. Well, I've kind of been a little stuffy for a week or two now. So I went to the doctor, and my blood pressure was elevated, and she was like, she's like, but you're sick. It'll probably be better. So this week we had somebody, well, it's the lady that does our CPR training, right? And she had a booth set up. So I got my blood pressure checked yesterday morning. Then I got it checked after lunch. And they gave me the paper, and it's like stage 2 hypertension or something. I think my bottom number's a little high. And she was like, well, you've been kind of running around a little busy. I'm like, yeah. So I got it checked again today, kind of still in that category. And the doctor already told me last week, she said, if that bottom number keeps staying where it's at, you're going to have to go on blood pressure medicine. So I'm like, I don't like to take medicine at all. You know, I tried to stop taking, so I'm getting a little personal, but my wife jokes at me. She said, sometimes you just have to take medicine, because I have high cholesterol too, right? Well, I decided to stop taking the medicine several years ago. It was kind of when I went through some surgeries and some this and that, and I didn't start taking it back thinking, oh, it'll just get better. No, it did. It got worse. So she started me back on that. So now I may have to start on blood pressure medicine, right? But stress can also cause high blood pressure. So I'm like, how do I reduce my stress? I got to smile more. You know, I just got to smile. You know, but it does. It can help because we have cortisol, right? I'm not a health person. You know, again, if Google's steering me wrong on this, or Mayo Clinic, then I'm just way wrong, right? So cortisol is smiling reduces cortisol, which is a stress hormone. That's what I'm trying to say. So if we decrease cortisol, then maybe we're living a little bit healthier and more productive and all this and that. So anyway, if you kind of have a thought, I was kind of like, you know, we could call this "What's Your Purpose?" But if me personally, I'm just going to title tonight "Smile," right? Because it can do a lot of things for you. And I know we all go through things, and I know we all get down and out, and it's just life itself, right? Kind of hits us a lot of ways, in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's hard to smile. Sometimes it's just hard enough for, you know, to want to get out of the house or be around people, right? But I found that smiling can have a positive effect on those. I don't like going into grocery stores. Definitely not Walmart. But I'm just sorry, it's not my happy place, right? I don't want to go shopping. But when I do, I try to be friendly to people, right? Because a lot of times, you know, the clerks or the people in the store, they're in bad moods. Bigger than me, yes, most are bigger than me, except, well, anyway, I won't call them out. There's a family in here of really short people in this church. But when I'm at a store or restaurant, sorry, yeah, I'm back. I try to smile. I try to say nice things. How are you doing? You know, I try to, if I hear conversations, and I'll make a little off, not anything bad, but I'll say a little something just to see and get a smile out of somebody, because maybe they'll leave feeling a little bit better, right? You know, because smiling can bring happiness to people. They don't want to be at work at 9 o'clock at night at Food Line, right, or wherever. I mean, I'm off. I want to be at home. People have to work different shifts and all those kinds of hours. I get that. I'm not saying it, but let's look at Proverbs. Solomon's got some things going on right here, right? Proverbs, there's 3 Proverbs, 15 and 13. It says, a glad heart makes a happy face, but a broken heart crushes the spirit. If we look at Proverbs 15 and 30, he says, a cheerful look brings joy to the heart, and good news makes for good health. And then he says in Proverbs 17 and 22, a cheerful heart is good medicine, right? He's talking about smiling, basically, is the way I look at it, right? But a broken spirit saps a person's strength, right? When we're broken, we get zapped. When we're down, it can just take all the life out of us, right? So Solomon here, I think he's kind of onto something with this cheerful heart. I try to slow down when I say that because I can really mess up that word cheerful. Then with my stopped up head and I can't hear, it's really kind of hard. But if we avoid despair, that can help with our healthy life, right? I know when I get down and out on certain things, or when my stress level rises, I feel worse. I know that, and I know that my wife keeps saying that I'm still trying to figure out, I guess I am stressed, and I always stay kind of wide open and on the go and worrying about things, and I think I'm a lot like my grandfather was, always just thinking and always doing, and maybe some of my heart stuff is I got to slow down. The stress is just too much, and the worry and the go. One, I need to be more active. I need to be more healthy because I think that can help too, right? But we have to have joy because I think some of this can start with that. Pastor, I think it was Sunday. Didn't he talk about attitude? Did he not use that word attitude Sunday? Does anybody remember that? Okay, and he was talking about how, he was talking about attitude, but if we think about our attitude can affect our life, the outlook of life, and our health, right? So, if we're joyful, then the negative circumstances that want to knock us down and off that pedestal or knock us off balance, right? If we're in a better state, in a more joyful state, a more happy state, right? Then those negative circumstances are less likely to knock us off balance. That's what I was trying to say. Okay, that we can, I guess, take those obstacles kind of more head on. All right, but if those obstacles that we face cause us to be more negative, right, then we lose our joy. We aren't as cheerful with others. We don't have that smile on our face, right, and it can lead to even more hardship. Right, so life is just, it's kind of like I don't want to say that. That's from a movie. It's like a roller coaster, right? It's just up and down, and there's all kinds of peaks and valleys. Don't say it. I have a joke at work that everything's a song, a movie. You can almost relate anything to just different stuff. So I'm sorry. My mind is always racing and working. But Paul tells us in Philippians, it says, always be full of joy in the Lord. So we have to be full of joy, Even when we're down and even when things are going not our way, we still need to find joy in the Lord, right? And for me, I want to still continue to, even when I'm the baddest of days, I still want to have a smile on my face. Maybe not always, but at least when I'm interacting with people. Because I just want to see them smile back. I want them to have a better day maybe than I'm having. I want God's light, right, to shine through into the darkness, because I think that's, Jesus tells us that in Matthew 5 and 14. If we were reading 5, 14, 15, and 16, and I stopped and just put in there verse 14, I guess this is the Beatitudes, the latter part of the Sermon on the Mount, right, in that chapter 4. Anyway, Jesus says, you're the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. And I didn't put the rest of the scripture in there, all right? But that light that shines can be a smile, right? We often will call our teeth our pearly whites, right? I get to get up tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock and go to the dentist and have my teeth cleaned. And we call them our pearly whites. They shine, right? It's God's light shining. I know that may sound a little funny, but if there's a couple little things that if we think about and if we relate it to our smile, right, it's reflecting that joy. It's reflecting God's glory. right? And I don't like to smile and show my teeth at all, right? But I do like to have that 10 to 12 muscles, not the great big one, right? But um, the smile can shine and as like a testimony of our life, right? Because if we're happy and we're full of joy, right, then hopefully somebody's going to realize that. Maybe they're going to ask questions. Maybe they're just going to begin to feel better, right? And then God's being glorified because of that, because he's used us in that way. So, here when Jesus is telling his disciples they're the light of the world, then, I think he's telling them, hey, smile, right? Let people know the joy that you have, in your life. All right? A smile is a gift from God, right? It's a reflection of our inner joy that should bless others, all right? It should inspire other people, when we're suffering, right? If we're still smiling, we're demonstrating that we trust in God. We want to smile when good things are happening. Well, we need to smile, when we're kind of down and down and out or whatever, right? When things aren't necessarily going our way, we still have to trust in God. God tells us, or in Numbers it tells us, chapter 6, it says, may the Lord bless you and protect you. Probably you'll know these. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious on you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. So these scripture here are showing God's blessing for you, the individual, right? He smiles down on us, so we need to send that back out to others, right? He says, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord protect you. May he smile on you and be gracious and show you favor and give you peace. I spelled peace wrong. I spelled it like a piece of paper. That's funny. I just noticed that. I'm sorry. Y'all can't see it, but I can. All right. There's still hope. I have that right here, right? Together, right, these can convey hope, right? Because God is smiling down on us, and that can give us hope, right? Hopefully to reflect that back, right, and smile on others. When we ask God to bless us and bless others, then we're asking him to do those things. May the Lord bless you and protect you and smile on you and be gracious to you and give you peace, right? These things demonstrate love. They demonstrate encouragement, and that's what most people need. I need it, right? I need love. I need encouragement. I need others to show that they care about me. I'm trying to do the same thing for others as well, but we all, I feel like, need that, right? And all of that can start with what? A simple smile, right? Just a simple smile of, or a wave or a how are you doing? This time of year, it's a Merry Christmas, right? So I was trying to think back. I don't know what to do with my hands. They really just bother me. They're going all over the place. I want to say maybe 35 years ago. 35, 16. Yeah, probably 35 years ago. I was somewhere around 16 years old. Did y'all like the air math I just did? It works. I was a junior fireman in Reed's Fire Department, right? I don't remember if this was 1989, 90, somewhere in there, 92 I graduated. I still think it was 90. We bought a brand new brush truck right here at Reed's Fire Department, right? This was a Chevrolet 3500 four-wheel drive, cabin chassis. They put, box on it. Well, at the time, I had, and I've had a couple over the years, I had a Dalmatian. And that Dalmatian loved to ride in my car because I had a Mustang. If I'd take it to the fire station, she would ride up in the fire truck, horns, nothing bothered her. Well, we got to be in the Christmas parade that year. She was sitting in between me and whoever was driving, and her name was Smiley, by the way. Go figure. This is no joke. I don't know who named her, if it was me, my dad, whatever. Her name was Smiley, and that's this Dalmatian. She was a little female. She was the most loving thing in the world, right? And she would just sit right there in that whole parade, and we're waving at people and throwing candy. I think you could throw candy back then. We were, waving and doing all that stuff, hitting the horn. And she just sat right there and didn't move, just like, she was a princess riding through a parade, right? And I just remember how happy people were seeing that, right? Now, she made it on. I went on to finish high school, went on into college, and I think it was sometime in college. She hadn't gotten on up in age, and Dad called me and told me one winter, morning, she just didn't make it, right? It was her time. She had gotten blind, and he had kept her another good many years after I had kind of moved away. All right, but I remember that so vividly, and I wish I had a picture of it. Well, let's fast forward to last Monday. Yes, last Monday. So my daughter was the Christmas queen for her high school this year. Now, Cheyenne had never been honored with anything like that. She was chosen by the teachers of the school or whatever. So we were in the, I'm getting around to what I'm getting to. Y'all just got to hear my story, okay? Because if not, we're going to be done in 5 minutes. But so she got to be in the homecoming parade while I asked a friend of mine at work for a Corvette. Well, it was a straight drive Corvette, but it was a really cool, fast Corvette, right? And we rode through it, and for about 30 minutes, I'm riding this clutch, and, we're going up around West Davidson High School in Tyro, and I smell the clutch kind of burning. But we made it through it, and I was like, Cheyenne, we cannot do this for the Lexington parade. That thing's an hour plus long. I can't ask this guy to let me borrow it. He just lives across the river in Moxville. It would go really fast, though, and it was so sad. I'm bringing it home, and I'm getting passed on 52 because I'm holding it like it's 70, and that's like in third gear, And I'm like, this thing could really get you in trouble. He said, I'm not responsible for. He said, you're responsible if you wreck it, but I'm not responsible. Meaning he wasn't responsible if I got a ticket. I was like, I'll be good. All right. So anyway, I have to give a shout out to Capital Chevrolet, to Miss Debbie at the front, because I called and they let us use a brand new Corvette, and it was so nice. So me and Cheyenne riding through the Christmas parade last Monday. She's sitting up there and just, waving and smiling, and Melissa was filming or taking pictures, and my sister got to ride with me. I think my sister had more fun than we did, right? But we get to go through this, and this is where I'm going. And Cheyenne, people would holler, cool car, and I'd be like, yeah, I know, and I'd rev the motor and pop it in neutral, because it was just like, you just do your fingers. Like, it was really cool, it's the way these things are. It's just like no gear shifter. It was just like a push button. And I'm like, this is awesome. And then I'd put it back in drive, and Cheyenne would almost slide off the top, and we'd grab her, But she's standing there, and this is where I'm going, and this is nothing. I know what she was saying and the words, but she was like, I feel like a princess riding through that. Like royalty is the word she used. She's waving at people, and they're smiling back at her, saying Merry Christmas. They don't know us from anybody. Now, we did have this big old 6-foot banner on the side of the car. I kind of Freddy-fied the banner. Cheyenne did a great job. It was, Cheyenne Hedrick, Christmas Queen, Merry Christmas, her picture. You could read her banner, right? I mean, this thing was the length of a Corvette door. It was long. So it was Freddy-fied. But people are saying, hey, Cheyenne. And she's like, I don't know who that is. They see your name, babe. It's right there on the side of the car. But she was like saying, it is so joyful to see these people smile back and just have joy on their face, right, for that little bit of time that we're riding through the parade, right? And, so I say, and I say all that story, my mom and dad have always put a lot into Christmas, right? That I am 51 years old, and they still, we still making sure that we're getting together and doing things, and spending time together and trying to slow down, and have that time, because we can also get wrapped up in the hustle bustle of this time of year, right? And not from spending money we don't have to get gifts that people probably don't need anyway, but we're going to exchange gifts. It'd be like, just save your money. I'm going to get you something, you're going to get me something, we'll be good. Just keep your money, But, we have family, we have friends, and all those things, but we need to really just slow down, right, and enjoy it. There's cooking and there's baking, and I got to be at this person's house and this person's house and this person's house, and it can feel overwhelming, right? So those few hours, because we had to get in line at 4:00, right? It didn't start till 6. We were done at 7:30, so and it's cold last Monday, and but for those few hours, right? Christmas just seemed a little bit more special this year. Right. One, I got to spend it with my daughter and my family doing that, right? And but it was seeing people, say cool car, and I'd pop it in neutral, and rev it up. You know what I'm talking about. This guy in the Mustang, he's really loud. But it was just, I understand what Cheyenne was saying. The feeling that we get because of happiness that we're seeing on others. And I think from my standpoint, right, that's one of the things that God has allowed me to do is to try to bring a smile to people's face, to be an encouragement, right? And I feel like a purpose of mine is to help brighten people's day, right? That may sound corny, it may sound dumb, I don't know, but as I was putting this together, I mean, man, it really does make sense, for me, right? So I want you to think about you all, right? I want you to keep thinking that, and I could all but point out several things of people in here, at least it would be my opinion, but you may have a different. But let's look at one more example in the Bible. And I've used this event, this story in the Bible of a little man who climbed a tree. And I know that's purely coincidental because Dathan gives me a hard time about being a little guy. But that means short in stature. All right. But let's think about it from a little bit different perspective. So I want to read Luke chapter 19, looking here at Zacchaeus. And it said in Jesus 1 through 5 is what I'm going to read. It says, Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. And there was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. So he ran ahead, climbed up a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. And when Jesus came by, he looked up, he saw Zacchaeus, and he called him by name, and he said, Zacchaeus, quick, come down, I must be a guest in your home today. So here we have Zacchaeus. We've got a man that's probably dissatisfied with his life, right? He's done some things that he shouldn't have. He's needing to make things right with a lot of people, right? And he's longing for salvation, all right? So he did all that he could so he could be noticed by Jesus. He couldn't see through the crowds. So he's like, I'm going to climb up here. I'm going to make it where Jesus can see me, right? And but then we have God. He knew what Zacchaeus needed, right? And he knew the I've used this in a message, where it was Zacchaeus' spot. But Jesus knew the spot where he was going to encounter Zacchaeus, right? And he stopped right there and he looked up. But I think he looked up with a big smile, which is warm and inviting. And he said, Zacchaeus, come on down here. We got to have a chat, right? Zacchaeus felt comfortable. He was like, man, all my little bit of effort to climb up this tree, and he stops and he smiles at me, right? Now this is me. I'm doing a lot of ad-libbing, but I'm just thinking, right? And so Zacchaeus comes down, and we know that in verse 6, he climbed right down, and he took Jesus to his house with great excitement and joy. Because I think of that smile that Jesus gave Zacchaeus, right? It gave him joy. It gave him the happiness that he was needing. And it all started with a smile from Jesus, maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I thought it sounded good anyway, right? Okay? But, when we're reaching somebody or we're trying to reach people, we may be changing their lives forever. And it could start with a smile, right? It could start with a nice, kind word. I watched this, was it the clip that they had up here? Because sometimes the skit guys, they showed the skit guys. Was it them trying to ask somebody to go to church? And I watched some of the skit guys stuff. They want you to pay for some of that. It was kind of expensive. There was one video, it was like $20. I was like, I'm not paying for that. All right. But, it was like, how do I ask the person to church? How do I approach it? What do I say? And sometimes at work or the people that you're around or you may come across, how do we say the right thing? How do we approach? How do we, say something maybe? To me, I think that's one, I can smile at people, I can be nice, but I need to take that step further and get to talking about church and talking about, those types of things as well, right? Because we could be changing somebody's life just by inviting them to church, because nobody else will. Who knows? I don't know, right? But there's those things. It could be that simple hello or whatever it is. But I think we need to let people see that we can't contain our joy, and they need to understand why. It's because we have Jesus in our life, right? And at this time of year, we're not celebrating the gifts that we're hoping we're getting, right? We're celebrating our Savior's birth, right? And that is the important thing, all right? And we should be overwhelmed with joy, and have that huge smile on our face that uses more than 10 or 12 muscles, right? It's just really cool facts, So I want to end with one last scripture, and we may get done early tonight. If we do, I apologize. You never know how long these things may go or last, right? But we represent Christ all the time, and I think we need to remember that, right? In everything that we do and everything that we say, in all of our actions, we're representing Christ, all right? So I think an expression can say a lot. And I know I'm guilty because my family, specifically my wife and my daughter, will get really upset because of my facial expressions at home. They will say something, and my face is not always a smile like a lot of people see it. And I will make a face, and it will upset them, and I've said nothing. And then I'm trying to figure out why I got in trouble. And they said, well, your face said it all. And I'm like, maybe I did. I don't know. All right? And then I stop and think, and you're right. I think my face does get a lot of expressions, and I use a lot of muscles, right? I wish you could lose weight by the way I use my face, right? And the muscles, but it doesn't work that way. All right? But it should, but it doesn't. All right? But I get in trouble because of my facial expression. So our face says a lot about who we are, right? How we feel, how we act, what we do, right? So think about that. I need to be more conscious of it because people can say stuff, and I guess my face will answer it, and I'll never have said a word. And especially with my wife and daughter, and hopefully they're not watching. I mean, they should be. Maybe they're not. But because I say things to get myself in trouble, which Pastor does that all the time. I don't see how he has any peace at his house because he's all the time getting himself in trouble. But Colossians 3:16 and 17 says, let the message about Christ in all its richness fill your lives. Teach and counsel each other with all the wisdom he gives. Sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs to God with thankful hearts. And whatever you do or say, do it as a representative of the Lord, giving thanks through him to God the Father, right? So everything that we do, from our facial expressions to our words to our actions to how we treat people, all of those things, right, need to be done as though we're representing God because it's his light that's shining through us, right? And that we should not be hiding that light, or making that light not be seen or making people wonder, man, that guy, he sure does say, he doesn't go to such and such church and doesn't he or she or whatever. We don't want people to question because of our actions, right? And sometimes, I guess, our facial expressions can say a lot. Right? So I'll kind of end with one last question. What impression of Christ do people have when they see or talk to you? Right? I'll do this in Sunday school or even with I like to ask questions because I like for people to think about it for their own selves, right? Because if I've gone through this, the questions have been asked as I'm writing it down and I'm thinking, oh man, what do people think of me? Or the impression, not necessarily of me, but am I glorifying God in everything that I do? I don't ever want me to get in the way of that. Right? I want people I want people to know that I love God and I'm serving God, and it is okay to have fun and to laugh and to smile because I think that joy is what we need in life. God doesn't want us to be down and out, and all those things. And I pray for my son all the time because he can be doing really, life seems like can be going really good for him, and just all of a sudden he can just kind of tank and be down in the dumps for whatever reason and not want to talk to anybody or not want to communicate. And it's hard to understand, right? I want him to have joy like I have, you know. Now, I know he needs Christ, right? And I don't always like to bring him up because I do with the young men all the time. But he's 28 years old, and I want him to do better. He's got a family coming in this world soon, right? I mean, he's got responsibilities, maybe within the next week, right? So, he's got to. I want him to, and we just have to pray for our family, all the time. The devil, will attack us through our family, and we have to lift them up, and we have to keep hope and pray, right? Even though, and I don't mean to use that as an example, or it's not that I'm talking about him, but I worry about him, right? We worry about our family, our kids. We want them to. I want to say, if I go back to my teenage years, I wish somebody cared more about me and my salvation then, right? That it took me leaving the church and not living for God to realize how important it was. I wish I would have stayed right with God, right? And that's all I want for the young people or the kids, is to try to impress upon them, that we need to stay living for Christ all the time. And I know it's so easy as we're graduating and we're going into the workplace, or we're going off to college like my daughter is in the fall, less than a year, right? And those are scary times, and I don't want her to slip away in her faith, right? Because I know what I did, right? So I guess it's so important to me, that I want to try to get people to understand that we gotta stay connected all the time. We got to be in right relationship all the time. I kind of just went way away from what I was talking about. Sorry about that. But what impression of Christ do people get when they see you, when they talk to you, right? What's your purpose? I know a lot of questions. What, is it a smile? Is it a whatever? Is it a kind word? Is it